In this video, I want to talk about a little bit of the separation between two types of thinking about the self and the philosophy of self, in regard particularly also to how it relates to situated personality and personality in general. So the philosophy of personality, but also the psychology of personality, that is a sub-branch of the philosophy of self and ultimately the science of self. And these two camps or schools have its origins in ancient Athens with Aristotle primarily, who was discussing ideas related to positive well-being and how to live a good life through virtue ethics in particularly, and through leading more of a meaningful value-based life rather than just engaging in the pursuits that brought us pleasure, and intrinsic pleasure in particular. And intrinsic pleasure is going to be important for cultivating meaning, and particularly also directing the self towards a more meaningful life. But Aristotle looked more at personality in this situated way, in which he didn't necessarily look at people when he was assessing personality or discussing it in terms of who they were right now, but who they could become. And who they could become if they directed themselves in that course, directed their perceptions, their motivations, their emotions, their feelings, their behaviors, and in particularly actions. He was very focused on actions and these transactions that occurred from our perception, from our motivations, from our emotions, from our feelings, from our behavior, as well as from our actions, subsequent actions, and an efficacy associated with where we directed our energy in particular. It's this direct direction of energy that contributed to aspects of the individual and the personality, or what Aristotle viewed it more in terms of explaining the self, as well as the self's relation to the soul in particular. And he looked at personality more in terms of its situated manifestation of habits, and particularly positive habits and also negative habits, because he was very interested in this, alongside this, the concept of the golden mean, which was to balance out the positive and the negatives within a particular trait, to balance it and balance particularly the processes and expressions of that trait, including the self-expressions and the embodiments, to which brings us to the second part: act more virtuously, or in the direction of positive well-being in particular. And it's through the golden mean that we can act more virtuously and find our higher self, and connect with more of this optimizing well-being that he referred to as eudaimonic well-being. And well-being can be studied more in this direct aspect and vein associated with subjectivity, and particularly self-subjectivity, and that has directly to do with, for example, positive and negative affect, how we're feeling in right now, our current perceptions right now, current motivations right now. It's also associated with our current actions and also current behavior, like various embodied behaviors that can be associated with expressions, emotions, feelings, and perceptions all together, right? But it's more associated with the pleasantness or the unpleasantness there, and that's has a qualitative aspect to it. And there's also our satisfaction within any given moment or time, and also thinking about it in the lifespan. So, because you might be satisfied at one moment, then when you're going to take a test or something, or you're answering a survey, you're asked to ask about how satisfied you are right now, but something a little bit ago upset you and bugged you a bit, and you're not as satisfied as you typically would. But then you're asked to think about how satisfied you are throughout your life or the course of your day. And to both these questions, it was like, yeah, actually, I'm quite satisfied. I was quite satisfied overall today. So you rate yourself a little bit higher on that. And then when you're thinking about in terms of your whole lifespan, you rate yourself higher on that, because generally speaking, you're doing pretty good, and you're a pretty optimistic person. So you circle that. And that has a subjective perception component to it, subjective motivation, subjective emotions, subjective feelings, subjective actions, subjective behaviors that are related to this qualitative aspect of the self. And then there's this other dimension, which is going to be directly related to that quality of your current experiences, in particular the quality of your being and your existence, your various embodiments and expressions, self-expressions, but that also relate directly to measures of quality of life. And then these will also connect with the eudaimonic aspects, because a lot of the subjective aspects, they're intercorrelated with the eudaimonic well-being, and this type of well-being is associated more broadly with positive well-being and also positive health and positive psychology. So positive physical health as well as positive psychological well-being are components of positive well-being, and they have health within the physiological and the psychological measured within them as well. And health regarding primarily our emotional expressions, our feelings, our perceptions, our motivations, our behaviors and our actions that are positive, rather than actually, say coughing or sneezing or being like having a cold. That's not quite what the measures are looking at. They're looking at life more holistically and how it's conducive to positive, optimal well-being. Essentially, it's not so much just health. So, and you could think of that as looking at if you're experiencing symptoms or a negative mood, right? That doesn't indicate that you're necessarily experiencing something bad, but it could indicate levels of stress, and that has a physiological component, and a component that's very much associated with our health and our day-to-day connections of various processes that's going to be measured throughout well-being, that's going to be slightly correlated there with the subjective well-being, such as our perceptions of how we're feeling in a stressful situation, our motivations of how we're experiencing and energizing ourselves in relation to this positive or negative situation that could be stressful, as well as our emotions, our feelings, our actions, and our behaviors. And eudaimonic well-being also has a component of meaning, the meaning that we experience in our day-to-day lives, but also it's more about this meaningfulness and what the self finds meaningful, and if they find that there's a meaning in life, or the self within self and others. And it also has a component of engagement that has more to do with this absorption within something that's interesting or an individual finds to be meaningful, and that's an important component too, that's distinct from meaning. So it's related to meaning, but it's different to meaning. It has more to do with this direct experience of some positive emotions, but positive perceptions, motivations, feelings, actions, and behaviors that tend to be associated with absorption and dedication within performing difficult or a range of tasks, and just doing the tasks, and also being focused or directing your perceptions, your motivations, your emotions, feelings, behaviors, and energy in a particular way and manner forwards. So that's engagement, and that's also captured within the eudaimonic dimension, falls under positive psychological well-being and positive well-being in general. And this is what Aristotle was concerned with when he was thinking about individuals and individuals' relationship to well-being, that had these individuated components, and he recognized that we were individuals, and that we had these individual values and expressions and virtues that did distinguish us, but what was more important was to act more in these balanced ways that are in accordance with the golden mean, that have a more temperate approach to things, if we were to act more virtuously and develop positive habits. So he was concerned about positive, healthy habits that supported well-being directly, and particularly optimizing well-being. And then he was also considered deeply virtue ethics and the effect of our perceptions, motivations, emotions, feelings, actions, and behaviors on how we lived and our well-being in general, and promoting positive well-being for the self. And then there's another school that's emerging also in ancient Greece, and then that's going to be with the Hippocratic school of personalities, looking at more health in relation to personality. And Hippocrates breaks down personality within these various temperaments that are associated with various regions of the body. And this tradition is carried on to personality traits with the theorizing of Gordon Allport and looking at trait theory more generally, and how this was actually derived from early experiences Gordon Allport has of exposure to various medical settings, and he was very interested in becoming a physician himself. And he defined personality initially as in terms of what made a healthy person. And he was interested in explaining personality characteristics to be able to develop his theories regarding what a healthy person and an ill person were. So early on, you can see this merging of well-being between ill well-being and positive well-being. And he took a different approach that has some foot in the psychoanalytic school, but also comes back to the origins of psychology within medicine, and within its roots in physiology and psychophysiology. And this is brought out through more of the psychological theory that pertains directly to this healthy person associated with healthy personality function that has to do with being individuals and individuating from others. And through this individuation process, we can cultivate greater health and well-being. And he's very much Hippocratic here. He draws from ideas of personality being linked to health in different regions of the body, and expressions and processes associated with that were conducive to ill health or positive health. And then that's a component to also what it means to live a good life, which was more of the primary focus of Aristotle. So there's these two general schools that are approaching the relationship between personality and well-being. One's primarily focused on positive well-being and moving towards that good life, and the positive self. So it's the positive self in relation to positive well-being. And then we have another school here that's focused more on health and personality, which is a subcomponent of well-being, and just more healthy functioning, or healthy positive functioning is the way you can think about it, as well as ill health and ill well-being. Particularly, it's this ill well-being, and in contrast to healthy positive functioning, that really characterizes the health psychology focus in personality and study. And that's all I wanted to say for this video, so I hope you enjoy.